Sponsored by the Big 98, Nashville's #1 for new country and the home of the Bobby Bones Show.
We're so thrilled to have back on the show Grammy award-winning multi-instrumentalist, author, magician, he does it all, John McEuen. John, it's great to have you back on the show.
Thank you, Eric.
You know, especially when you've got an incredible new album out now, and you told me about this, a few years ago with this concept, the Newsman, that came out this past April 12th. What a unique concept, John, but I'm not surprised with you. Like the last time we talked when you had the book come out, Will the Circle Be Unbroken and everything, all these projects you do. How did you come up with the concept of the Newsman with poetry, music, spoken word, everything?
Well, over the years, I've collected stories. I've been collecting them. A couple of these are like 15 years old. And some are 10, some are 8, some are in the last year that I recorded them. And I saw The News of the World by Tom Hanks. Did you see that movie?
Yes, I did.
Well, man, the guy goes around delivering stories of what's happening, and it's time to get this album out.
Right.
So I put it together and made it a whole album, and it's spoken word, which people go, spoken word? Well, the devil went down to Georgia with spoken word.
Right. And also, like you and I talked about too, John, with your illustrious career with the Nitty Gritty Dirt Band, being a founding member as well, you tour around a lot still, playing your many instruments, although you're known as the string wizard with the banjo.
Thank you.
Had to throw that in, sorry. But, but what I've always enjoyed is when you do these shows is that you share stories also.
Well, that's the important thing. People have the records. If somebody's coming to see you, they've been listening to the records for 10, 15, 20, 30, 40, 50 years on some of them. And I want them to know what happened behind the songs. And I want them to feel like they're part of the music, because they are. I mean, without the audience, you got nothing,
Right.
It's like really important to relate to them.
Well, and I enjoyed all the tracks on here. Once again, deep listening on this album and hearing your voice and knowing you as I do, you kind of feel like you're hanging out with a friend. And even on like Jules' theme, pulling from Jules Verne, just all of these stories, it's like, you really make them your own, John.
Jules' theme is the only instrumental on the record, and it's one that I wrote with the idea of Jules Verne is telling his friend in a cemetery about his recently deceased young wife. And that's the setup. When I write music, I try and think of a little script for it. And that was the one that was for that one. And it's on there because maybe people will find a story of their own to tell with that behind it.
Right.
So I'm curious to see what people come up with.
Well, and we were talking too, John, and in your spare time, when you're not on tour and creating new albums and books and everything else, 18 years on Sirius Radio with your show.
Sirius XM,
yeah.
Yeah, it's been 18 or 19. And it's a show that runs once a month on the Village channel. And it's called Acoustic Traveler, and that's the name I came up. Well, we need a name for the show. Well, how about Acoustic Traveler? Okay. And
String Wizard was taken?
That's a little presumptuous.
Truth in advertising, I'm just saying.
The first album on Vanguard, String Wizards S, because everybody was a string wizard. The people on my first album were Sam Bush, Jerry Douglas, I can't remember quick enough. The fiddle player, Stuart Duncan, David Greer, and all those people. And they were all string wizards. And they were,
as are you.
They were awarded such awards over the ensuing few years later.
Well, and I've got to bring this up too. Speaking of awards, certainly, you're in many, Hall of Fame, including the Banjo Hall of Fame. But now, you've been written up in Forbes.
That was one I jumped for. And I got this call. This is Forbes magazine. You want to do an? Yes, I do. What? I've been reading Forbes since I was 22. I'd get on the airplane and open up my Forbes and get to it. And Malcolm Forbes was great. I interviewed him.
Really?
Yeah, on video. I interviewed him when he flew his balloon in Sturgis, his big motorcycle balloon. Yeah. And he was so quick. I asked him, because the balloon just landed, he's standing outside of it, and I said, is Malcolm Forbes enthusiastic about biking or a biker? He says, I'm a motorcycle enthusiast. And, you know, it's just like that. It's like,
So quick.
but he was really nice.
Well, and I got to bring this up also. You know, obviously at 18, listening to the Dillards kind of inspired you to pick up the banjo and then other instruments.
Thank you, Doug Dillard.
Did you have any idea, John, that, you know, a few years later now, that you would still be living...
I'd be talking to you?
Yes. Well, and also, I mean, you know, how many interviews have you done? I mean, you know, thousands.
Over 11,000.
Over 11,001. And so, you know, and TV shows and concerts. Did you have any idea that you would still be this prolific now?
I thought I wouldn't be here by now. My father died at 52 from sleep apnea. You know what that is?
Yes, I do.
Yeah, and they didn't have it diagnosed then, but years later, my mother sent me a newspaper clipping. She was that age where she didn't write letters anymore. She wrote in the border of the newspaper article, you know.
Right.
I think you should read this article.
My mother still does that with me.
Writes on the newspaper?
Yes.
Oh, yeah. Well,
Yeah,
you
and
get it.
magazine articles.
And it was 1989, and it was about sleep apnea. And I went and took a test. I've been using a CPAP machine for 32 years now, I think. And thank heaven she found that article. I don't think I'd be here.
Wow.
You know, because I woke myself, the sleep studies test said, you woke yourself up 182 times. Oh, well, no wonder I feel so crummy in the morning.
Well, you know, and besides the new album with the Newsman, also we were talking about your book that came out a few years ago, a year and a half ago, that is still charting.
It's 22 on the Amazon chart, on the folk book chart.
And includes the photography from your late brother.
My brother took all the photos. He managed the Dirt Band. He produced the records. And he took photos of the early Dirt Band and all the Circle Be Unbroken sessions.
Right.
Which means there were 105 photos. He was very careful when he clicked the shutter. And I wrote a story behind every photo and put it in the book.
It's an amazing book.
Oh, thank you.
Powerful. You know, and what still strikes me too, and I know you get this brought up to you all the time, John, is that, you know, will the Circle Be Unbroken, that work of music, you know, and certainly, you know, with you appearing on 3 episodes of Ken Burns Country Music and everything, it's like, it's so historic, you know, how you and the Nitty Gritty Dirt Band were able to intertwine with these incredible country music artists. You know, Roy Acuff, Mother Maybelle, all these great artists of the time.
Merle
you know.
Travis, Doc Watson, Earl Scruggs.
Right, but the
Jimmy Martin.
listening to the music.
Hi, I'm Jimmy Martin, the world's best bluegrass singer. Nice to meet you.
But listening to the music, you know, it was so groundbreaking at the time, John.
Yeah, it was very strange.
And it still holds up.
I wanted to get Earl and Doc on a record with the band to maybe get them a new audience because their crowds were getting smaller.
Right.
Merle Watson said, this is going to be perfect because Daddy's drawing fewer people. The folk thing is over. And anyway, Doc told me years later, I have to do Tennessee Stud every show, it seems like, and people demand it.
That's a good problem, though.
Yeah, it was.
When people demand it and show up at the show, it's like, okay,
Yeah.
you can keep playing then.
And yeah, it's really, when we were recording it, my brother had me run a 3 3/4 tape, 3 3/4 inches per second
Right.
tape recorder to capture all the talking. Wow. And he took that and in his editing process, he put the talking in between some of the songs. And I find that the stories, the people, that's what they want to hear. They know the music,
Right.
they've heard it for years, they've got the record. And when I go out on the road, I try and make sure I incorporate telling people where songs like House at Pooh Corner came from.
Right, like you and I were talking about, you know, Kenny Loggins and the early tracks from that. But, you know, I was thinking too, John, you know, even with your own memoir, you're going to have to update that at some point. You're expanding the story. You're adding chapters.
Yeah, it came
Which
out.
will be great for the documentary when Ken Burns does that on you.
No, funny, yeah. So,
Just putting it out there in the universe.
okay, Ken, are you listening? Dayton
I would
Duncan?
watch it. I mean, how amazing. I mean, what a prolific career you continue to have, though, John.
I just feel lucky. I feel fortunate. I feel fortunate every day. I feel fortunate that Marilyn, my wife, we've been married, I don't know, 27, 20, 30, whatever, long time.
Right.
And it seems like it's just starting. Wow. She's a wonderful person. Anyway. Oh.
And there's going to be obviously, a big tour with the Newsman, and you've got, between, your own great solo albums and songs that everybody wants to hear from the Nitty Gritty Dirt Band, the stories, and now the Newsman. You're gonna have to have like a whole team. It's gonna have to be like immersive. It's
A
gonna be
one-day
like
show.
It's gonna be like the Van Gogh thing, and in between you can do magic also.
Wait a minute, Van Gogh never sold anything. He put it in his garage.
But I mean, like the immersive.
I think the most he got was $8 for one of his paintings.
Until he was gone.
Yeah.
And there you go.
Now
But I'm
they're
just saying, you're
12
gonna have to do like the immersive John McEuen.
Oh yeah. Well, I'll do my best.
How many instruments do you take on the road when you do the shows?
4.
Okay, that's not bad for
Mandolin,
you.
banjo, guitar, and fiddle.
Right, and you're still endorsed by Deering.
Yeah, Deering Banjo came up to me and said, "You want to make a banjo with a special edition?" And I made a. They listened to everything I asked them to put on a banjo, and they did it. And the John McEuen Deering Banjo is available now.
Is that incredible?
I think it is.
I do too.
I mean, I was a teenager in Orange County carrying a banjo around and a guitar.
Right.
And then the fiddle and mandolin came along. And it was like incredible, yes.
Yes. You're like the Barbara Mandrell of Americana and Bluegrass. You kind of merge it all.
I have better hair.
You can back yourself up, John. You know what I mean? With all the instruments.
Well, sometimes I have to. On the Newsman album, some of the tracks I did all the music, and some of them I had David Hoffner, a Nashville treasure. He's
Right.
worked with Jim Ed Norman and all kinds of people, and Chris Caswell, and the one track is a Nashville band, and that's Fly Trouble, a 1948
Fly
Hank
Trouble's
Williams.
so great.
You like that?
Yes, a lot.
Oh, my brother told me I should do that, so I learned it and did it.
It's so good. And listening to the Newsman, I couldn't help but think, for your next project, because I know you're always working on another one, John, you're going to have to do like a whole album of duets where other artists.
How did you know that's what I was going to do? No, are you?
Where other artists,
That's not in a press release or anything. But that's the hope. I'm going to call up people and say, "Remember, you said you'd record with me? Well, let's do it." It'll be me and one other person, and maybe a bass and percussion.
I would buy it. I mean, what a great concept, though. I mean, with all of the people that you've worked with over the years, John, and that you've been on their albums and helped them, why not bring them on your album?
That's what I say.
The tough part is that everybody's going to want to come on.
I don't know.
Yes, they will.
I'll find out.
I have a feeling that you may have to do like a double LP or something. This may have to go vinyl. Yeah, I know the Newsman is going to be on digital and on CD, but I just have a feeling that you're going to have a lot of friends going, "Hey, John, can I come on the album?"
I hope so.
Well, I want to make sure, I know the album is out, the Newsman, and people, however they, consume music digitally and everything else, and available on CD. Are you going to have it on CD with you on tour?
Well, yeah. And,
okay. And your books?
It looks like this.
Yeah.
This is a small version of the album cover.
We can show the big ones.
And that's me on the back.
Yes,
My wife
it
took
is.
that picture.
You look like a professor now. Yeah,
Well,
very
the
authoritative.
mountain man had to graduate. you heard of Bat
Yes.
Masterson?
Yes.
He was a gunfighter in the Old West. He became a sports writer for the St. Louis newspaper.
Exactly.
And he did that for 12 years.
I kind of liked your mountain man look, back in the day.
Yeah,
a little
but
rough around the edges.
He went to town.
Well, I'll tell you what, however you consume music, the Newsman is out now. Be sure and pick it up, add it to your digital playlist. You're going to love it. It's just incredible, John, hearing your voice and the music. I can't wait to see you live on tour. I know you're doing a lot of shows this year, and that possibly there will be a duet album coming out in the next year or so, also in your spare time.
That'll be next year.
Between the Sirius XM radio show.
Yeah.
and updating a book or two.
Well, there's one book that's in the works. I've got a children's songbook of O Susanna. I did O Susanna with 50 goats and a cow and a dozen kids and for Sesame Street.
Right.
And that's going to be a children's songbook about
Oh my
that
gosh,
big.
I can't wait.
And the Mountain Whippoorwill. I have an illustrated version of that coming out.
Incredible. Well, I'll tell you what, John McEuen, thank you so much for coming on the show. Be sure and follow John through all the social media, the website, and also, you know, you got to add the Newsman and go see this man out live. John, thanks for coming on the show again.
Thank you.
Good to see you.
Nice to see you, Eric.
Sponsored by the Big 98, Nashville's #1 for new country and the home of the Bobby Bones Show.